Hello, and thank you for viewing this video presentation as part of the second public open house for the City of Cornwall Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw Review. The City has retained WSP to assist in completing the review and preparing a new comprehensive zoning bylaw. My name is Nadia DeSanti, and I am the Consulting Team Project Manager. Together with my colleagues Casper Koblau and Anita Sott, we will be narrating this video presentation. As you know, many of the city's facilities are closed and public meetings are being held virtually due to COVID-19. In place of in-person engagement, we have prepared this video presentation to provide an overview of the draft discussion paper. Future public open houses for the project will be planned either online or in person when it has been deemed safe to do so, as there will be many opportunities for residents to get involved throughout the project. The first public open house was held at the Civic Center on February 19, 2020 to introduce the project. Since that time, a draft discussion paper has been prepared on key zoning issues that will be addressed in the new zoning bylaw. This is the second public open house for the project, and we welcome your feedback on some questions that we will be asking. This video presentation contains commentary to help describe the information on each slide. Once you have finished watching or listening to the video, please visit the city's website at www.cornwall.ca/zoning review to review the draft discussion paper and display boards. On the website, you will also find a link to a survey and contact information to submit questions or comments to the city about this project. The survey will be open until May 31st, 2020 at 11:59 p.m. Slide 2 provides an overview of this video presentation. As presented at the first public open house, we will briefly explain what a zoning bylaw is and why the city's zoning bylaw is being reviewed. We will also provide an overview of the project process. We will then provide an overview of the draft discussion paper and discuss some key zoning issues for community input. We will also explain how you can share your input with the city on these and other zoning issues you may consider to be important. Lastly, we will outline the immediate next steps in the zoning bylaw review process, where property owners can find their current zoning information and how to stay involved in the project.
Slide 3 describes what a zoning bylaw is. A zoning bylaw is a legal document under the Planning Act that a municipality uses to regulate the use of land and future development. By regulating these matters, zoning can help to manage potential conflicts between land uses. A zoning bylaw also implements the land use objectives and policies of a community's official plan. The City of Cornwall's current zoning bylaw was approved by Council in 1969. It has since been amended and consolidated over the years as zoning bylaw amendments have been approved by Council. The Planning Act requires municipalities to update their zoning bylaw to conform with their official plan within 3 years of a new official plan coming into effect. Slide 4 further describes what a zoning bylaw includes. A zoning bylaw establishes a series of zones, such as residential, commercial, and industrial zones. Each zone lists the type of uses that are permitted, along with specific standards for how a property may be developed. A zoning bylaw also includes definitions for permitted uses and other terms used in the document. Slide 5 further describes what a zoning bylaw includes. A zoning bylaw includes both general provisions that apply to all zones and specific provisions for each zone, including requirements for where buildings and structures can be located on a property, lot area and dimension, for example, minimum lot width and minimum lot depth, minimum setbacks from lot lines, streets, and water bodies. These required setbacks create a building envelope on a property. The image on the top right-hand side of the slide illustrates where the main building on a lot can be located. Other requirements include maximum building heights and how height should be measured, parking requirements such as the minimum number of parking spaces required for a specific use and where parking spaces may be located, and landscaping requirements. Slide 6 explains why the city is undertaking the zoning bylaw review. As we mentioned, the current zoning bylaw dates back to 1969, and therefore it is time for the document to be updated to reflect current land use policies and conform to the city's new official plan, which was approved in 2018, as well as recent updates to provincial legislation and regulations. Reflect current development standards. For example, the definitions should be contemporary, and zoning requirements should be based on best practices. Review site-specific exceptions, which have been approved for specific properties, and delete those exceptions which are no longer relevant. And improve the document to make it modern, user-friendly, and easy to read. Slide 7 provides an overview of the zoning bylaw review process. The zoning bylaw review was initiated in January 2020 and will be completed over 8 stages. The 8 stages are presented in blue in the middle of the diagram. Key tasks and deliverables which will be completed under each stage are presented at the right side of the diagram. There will be numerous opportunities to get involved in the project, shown under each stage in green at the left side of the diagram. We hope that you will continue to stay engaged in the project and provide your input throughout each stage. A technical advisory committee has been established to help guide the zoning bylaw review process. The Technical Advisory Committee is comprised of members of city staff and representatives from the Raisin Region Conservation Authority, Cornwall Construction Association, Cornwall and District Real Estate Board, Heart of the City, and Cornwall Gravel Company.
Slide 8 provides an overview of the draft discussion paper dated May 2020. The discussion paper is available for review on the city's website at www.cornwall.ca/zoning review. The purpose of the draft discussion paper is to review the current zoning bylaw and identify key issues and opportunities to be addressed through the zoning bylaw review. The draft discussion paper outlines the legislative and regulatory planning context for preparing a new zoning bylaw. The paper includes a review of the current zoning bylaw structure. It also reviews the city's official plan land use policies to identify zoning updates that are required to conform to the official plan. Finally, the paper identifies key zoning issues and opportunities, some of which we are seeking feedback on through this online public open house. Slide 9 is where we will begin presenting key zoning issues for public input. These issues are discussed in more detail in the draft discussion paper and in the display boards on the city's website. You should see a yellow speech bubble icon on this slide, and in the top left corner of the following slides. This icon is also found on the display boards, which are on the city's website. The icon identifies a key zoning issue that the city is seeking feedback on from the public through an online survey. A link to the display boards and to complete the online survey is on the city's website at www.cornwall.ca/zoning review. Your responses to the online survey will help to guide the zoning bylaw review. Slide 10 introduces the topic of additional residential units. Additional residential units are self-contained residential units with a private kitchen, bathroom facilities, and sleeping areas. These units were previously referred to as second units prior to recent changes to the Planning Act through Bill 108, the More Homes, More Choices Act 2019. Under the Planning Act, municipalities must authorize additional residential units in their official plans and zoning bylaws. Additional residential units require a building permit and must comply with the Ontario Building Code, Fire Code, the city's zoning bylaw, and other city bylaws, such as the Property Standards Bylaw. A provincial guide is available to homeowners, which explains the building code requirements for adding an additional residential unit on their property. Slide 11 further discusses zoning considerations related to additional residential units. Under the Planning Act, additional residential units are permitted in detached, semi-detached, and row or townhouses, and in a building or structure ancillary to these housing types. Ancillary means a building or structure that is secondary and complementary to a house, for example, a detached garage. This means that 2 additional residential units, in addition to the primary unit, are permitted on a single lot, for a total of 3 residential units. For example, a single detached house may have 2 additional residential units comprised of a basement apartment, as well as an apartment in a detached garage on the same lot. These permissions enable more affordable housing and intensification options, as well as opportunities for independent living for family members and for homeowners to generate income from rental apartments. The city's current zoning bylaw refers to additional residential units as accessory apartments and only permits 1 additional residential unit on a property. The zoning bylaw must be updated to conform to the recent Planning Act changes, which now permit 2 additional residential units on a property. Other zoning considerations for additional residential units can include parking, servicing, design, and compatibility with existing neighborhoods. The Planning Act sets out regulations for parking requirements associated with additional residential units. For example, if a zoning bylaw requires a parking space for an additional residential unit, the regulations allow for tandem parking. More information on specific requirements in the regulations is available in the display boards and in the draft discussion paper. Slide 12 introduces the topic of tiny homes. Tiny homes are small, private, and self-contained dwelling units intended for year-round use. They can be a primary home or a separate structure on a property that has an existing dwelling. Tiny homes must comply with the Ontario Building Code and Fire Code, the city's zoning bylaw, and other city bylaws, such as the Property Standards Bylaw. Under the Building Code, tiny homes cannot be less than 17.5 square meters or 188 square feet. They must also be connected to water and sewer services. The pictures on the right side of the slide show different examples of tiny homes. Slide 13 further discusses zoning considerations related to tiny homes. The Province of Ontario has recently published a guide entitled Build or Buy a Tiny Home, Ontario Building Code Information. This guide is intended to assist property owners who may be interested in building a tiny home and identifies tiny homes as a potential affordable housing option. Zoning bylaws can promote tiny homes by defining and permitting the use or by removing minimum dwelling size requirements. Currently, the city's official plan and zoning bylaw do not explicitly address tiny homes. The zoning bylaw does not include requirements for minimum dwelling unit sizes in any zone. This means that dwellings of any size, including a tiny home, would be permitted if other zoning requirements are met, for example, setbacks and lot area requirements. If a property owner were to propose a development consisting of multiple tiny homes, each on their own lot, they would need a plan of subdivision. If a property owner were to propose building multiple tiny homes on a single lot, a zoning bylaw amendment would be required. The city is seeking the community's input on considerations for tiny homes in the new zoning bylaw. Please complete the online survey on the city's website to share your input. Slide 14 introduces the topic of pop-up shops. Pop-up shops are short-term, temporary retail spaces or structures. For example, pop-up shops can be set up in vacant storefronts, tents, trailers, shipping containers, and other temporary structures. Pop-up shops are usually located in areas of high pedestrian activity, like downtowns, shopping centers, parks, and along waterfronts. They are used by both new and existing businesses to gain exposure or set up a secondary location without committing to a permanent retail space. The pictures on this slide show examples of pop-up shops in Muskoka, Ontario, Bryant Park, New York, and San Francisco. The City of Belleville, Ontario, has also been successful in holding pop-ups on the bay to provide temporary retail space along their waterfront during the summer. Slide 15 further discusses zoning considerations for pop-up shops. There has been increased interest in the City of Cornwall around pop-up shops. For example, the recently completed Waterfront Master Plan includes recommendations for zoning provisions to facilitate food trucks and pop-up shops along the city's waterfront to bring activity to the area. The current zoning bylaw has provisions for temporary sales, which are limited to no more than a 72-hour period in any 6-month period. Temporary sales can occur in temporary structures and tents in proximity to and on the same lot as hotels, motels, community arenas, and public halls, and require a license. They can also occur in commercial zones and in areas where retail sales are permitted. The current provisions do not explicitly permit temporary sales in open space areas, such as in parks along the waterfront. The city is seeking the community's input on considerations for pop-up shops in the new zoning bylaw. Please complete the online survey on the city's website to share your input.
Slide 16 introduces the topic of short-term accommodations. Short-term accommodations are private rental accommodations for the traveling public, generally for stays of less than 30 days. They are listed by the property owner through websites and mobile apps like Airbnb and HomeAway. Benefits of short-term accommodations in a community can include increased tourism opportunities, increased diversity, supply, and affordability of accommodation options for visitors, and income generation for property owners. In some communities, short-term accommodations have also resulted in issues including nuisances and safety concerns, violations of apartment or condominium rules, changes to neighborhood character, and loss of long-term rental supply. Slide 17 further discusses municipal approaches to regulating short-term accommodations. Some municipalities are using a variety of approaches to regulate short-term accommodations, including but not limited to zoning bylaws. For example, some of these approaches include enforcing separate noise, property standards, and parking bylaws to address specific concerns, passing separate bylaws that require short-term accommodations to be licensed and registered, and defining short-term accommodations in a zoning bylaw and permitting them in specific zones, with other provisions such as maximum duration of rental periods, limiting short-term accommodations to a property owner's primary dwelling, limiting guests, among other provisions. Many municipalities who decide to regulate short-term accommodations do a study to inform the best policy and regulatory approaches, such as official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, licensing bylaws, administrative procedures, and changes to other bylaws. The city is seeking the community's input to determine if there is a need to further regulate short-term accommodations in Cornwall. Please complete the online survey on the city's website to share your input. Slide 18 introduces the topic of zoning along Vincent Massey Drive. Vincent Massey Drive was formerly the primary entry and exit to Cornwall from the west, prior to the completion of Highway 401 in 1968. Historically, the corridor contained uses oriented to the traveling public, as can be seen by the existing and former hotels and motels along the corridor. The role and function of Vincent Massey Corridor is changing as other routes now serve as primary accesses into the city. The pictures at the bottom of the slide show examples of the nature of development along the corridor, including accommodation type uses and large setbacks from the street. Slide 19 further describes the existing policy and zoning context for Vincent Massey Drive. Vincent Massey Drive is designated as general commercial in the city's official plan and is also identified as a major employment area. This means that the corridor supports a range of commercial uses and activities and is one of the locations where employment uses are concentrated. In the current zoning bylaw, the eastern portion of Vincent Massey Drive, from 13th Street to 15th Street, is zoned Community Commercial Shopping Center, or CCSC. This zone permits a broad range of commercial uses, like retail and food stores. From 15th Street to Power Dam Drive in the west, Vincent Massey is zoned Highway Commercial, or CH, which permits uses that require large lots and are more vehicle-oriented, such as hotels and motels, vehicle sales centers, outlets, garden centers, and home improvement centers. The highway commercial zone also requires large setbacks between buildings and the street. The picture at the bottom of the slide illustrates the two zones along Vincent Massey, with the portion zoned community commercial shopping center in blue and the portion zoned highway commercial in red. The city is seeking the community's input to determine if changes may be required to the highway commercial zone portion of Vincent Massey Drive. For example, would you like to see a broader range of commercial and other uses along the corridor? Should there be some mixed use, like retail stores and higher density apartments on upper stories? Should lot sizes be smaller with buildings closer to the street to be more pedestrian friendly? Please complete the online survey on the city's website to share your input.
Slide 20 describes the various opportunities to share your input on the draft discussion paper at this stage of the zoning bylaw review. On the city's website at www.cornwall.ca/zoning review, you will find the draft discussion paper, display boards that provide more information on the key zoning issues that have been discussed in this video presentation and include a series of questions for public input, and an online survey where you can share your thoughts on these key zoning issues. If you have additional questions, comments, or suggestions for the zoning bylaw review, you are encouraged to email the city at planning@cornwall.ca. Your email can be submitted in English or in French. A response will be provided in English or in French as required. Slide 21 outlines the immediate next steps in the zoning bylaw review. Following this online public open house and the closing of the online survey on May 31st, we will prepare an As We Heard It summary memo to document the survey responses and input received. We will then finalize the discussion paper to address any comments received, and the final discussion paper will be posted on the city's website. The next step in this project will be the preparation of a zoning strategy report, which will build on the zoning issues identified in the discussion paper. The draft zoning strategy report will include a series of recommended changes to the new zoning bylaw. We anticipate that this report will be posted on the city's website in the summer 2020 for public review and input. The report will also be presented to the city's Planning Advisory Committee for endorsement. This meeting will be open to the public. The zoning strategy report will form the basis of the city's new zoning bylaw. Slide 22 provides a link to where you can find the existing zoning for your property. The easiest way to determine the zoning which applies to your property is to visit the city's website at the link provided on the slide and access the city's interactive zoning/land use map. Using this interactive map, you can then search for your property's zoning by address. Once you determine the name of the zone which applies to your property, you can look up the zone and provisions in the city's current zoning bylaw available at the same website link. Slide 23 provides an overview of how you can stay involved in the city's zoning bylaw review process. You can visit the city's website at www.cornwall.ca/zoning review for regular project updates as the project moves forward and to review engagement materials and reports as they become available. We encourage you to send your written questions and comments to planning@cornwall.ca in English or in French. Future public open houses will be advertised on the project website, on the city's social media accounts, through newspaper notices, and in community bulletins at major city facilities. Slide 24 is the final slide and provides contact information. The city contact for the zoning bylaw review process is Mary C. Joyce Smith, Division Manager of Planning for the City of Cornwall. Mary can be reached using the project email or by phone at 613-930-2787 extension 2335. Thank you for viewing this video presentation and for your participation and valued input into the city's zoning bylaw review. We look forward to seeing you at future in-person public open house events. Until then, we wish you and your families all the best during this time. Thank you.